So, well, I guess with all the different projects you worked on, which one do you think you felt had the best dynamic between the creative teams?
Well, I mean, my two favorite shows in my career are Darkwing Duck and Hellboy animated for clearly different reasons. Uh, DuckTales, excuse me, Darkwing was the most fun because we kept thinking we were at the end, and then suddenly ABC wanted 13 episodes, and we gave them 13 that we had in work, which meant we got to come up with another 13.
Hmm.
And then again, we thought we were done and started, slowing down, and then they wanted a second season, so we were kind of recharged and we could do 13 more episodes, even though with those 13 we had to go through the normal pitching process with the network. Um, so I mean, that was fun. Everybody enjoyed the show, and actually the show that never aired, uh, Team Atlantis, was a series based on the Atlantis movie that we were being really ambitious. I basically was taking the position of, well, I'm never going to get to do a Hellboy show, even though I had pitched it at Disney.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm going to make this my Hellboy. And it was supernatural and was same mystery and all of that. And while we were working on it, we were getting very excited. And then the executive who helped get us sold kind of turned on us and didn't it was just at a certain point, because the writers are so far ahead in premises, we may have had 10 scripts almost done, but that means we have another 10 or more outlines and maybe even some more premises. So mentally we're like in episode 36 while the staff is just moving through the first half dozen.
Hmm.
So they're totally enthusiastic while we're going like, I don't even know what show this is anymore. But people were so excited about those early scripts and we're saying this could be the best thing we've ever done. I mean, that was such a great feeling, a great supercharged feeling, which ended when we laid off 80 people on Friday the 13th because the show was canceled because the movie came out and didn't do what they expected. And that was all. As it was, we were sold to be on ABC Saturday morning, which at the
Yeah.
time had become One Saturday Morning, which was like all quasi educational stuff. And it was like, I kind of knew instantly, it's like, well, that's not going to fit because we were doing a PG kind of show,
Hmm.
with action adventure and explosions and all of that. Um, and it was just kind of being forced on ABC. So as soon as they thought the movie wasn't going to do well and they wrote it down, that was all ABC needed. It was like, that's it, we're canceling the order on
Yeah.
that. It was just terrible. And I'm happy I eventually got to do Hellboy, that got to do some of the stuff. We were at least able to take 3 of the episodes that were in work and turn them into a sequel to Atlantis called Milo's Return, which was 3 episodes of the show. And then we were given permission to do some connecting tissue to make it feel like one story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they thought it would be like 5 minutes or something. And instead we did 15 minutes to really try to make it work. And nobody stopped us. So, um, and even then on one of the, actually it was my script, um, the ending that was possibly the creepiest ending we could possibly do, uh, was changed in the final mix, and it's on the DVD as an extra scene. Um, but I had to, make that change. So if you see the extra scene, you go, "Oh wow!" you know. Uh,
Was it? So that was
so
definitely over
that show
the.
was really, as far as the crew being excited and the
Yeah.
writers certainly early on excited. That was like, I think it would have been Disney's Batman, kind of, in that it would have been a groundbreaking show that's really was, even though based on the movie, so it wouldn't have gotten the same kind of heat of as Batman coming out of nowhere. um that would have been something special.
Well, especially with like, the idea of Atlantis because like, even though the movie didn't do well, I've gone back and watched it and like it's got some of the best scene design ever, man. Just the different
Yeah,
type of architecture, character design. I mean, some of the just the different action scenes are just so well done. I mean, it's that was the one with Michael J. Fox, right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
okay. We
our
make it sure
premise was basically, our premise was there was a time when Atlantis sent, you know, merchants and educators all around the world, and they left some of their technology and artifacts.
Mhm.
And the idea was that when that crystal was reactivated, that it basically broadcast mystical energy or whatever. So those artifacts that you may think was just a an interesting jewelry bracelet or something
Right.
suddenly is glowing, and it's a portal to another land or something like that. So the idea is that this team had to go around the world to uh, get those artifacts. And the original pitch, which we were forced to simplify, was that no, these crystals, because there was a gag in the movie, I believe, where Kita was actually hundreds of years old, as I recall.
Mhm.
Or maybe I'm making that up. Anyway, so the idea they all had these crystals, so they all were kind of Scrooge McDuck, ageless. And so we actually were telling stories of different decades from the 30s
Oh,
to,
that's
which
cool.
would have really opened up stories like this is World
Yeah,
War
yeah.
II, this is um,
Well, that and
yeah,
bringing it
we
on
were told
the
we couldn't do
comics.
that because they said it's too complicated. You can't do that time travel thing, and it's like it wasn't time travel. I mean, that's the kind of thing that Netflix wouldn't bat an eye about. They'd say, "Oh, how cool is that?"
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so instead, we just had it. We kind of set it in the period and just said, "Well, they're world travelers, and we'll do that sort of thing."
Well, I mean, it gives you that would have given you such an opportunity to bring in so many different like genres to it because you could have done like a crime
Oh
noir
yeah,
one. You could have done, yeah, you could go like the 40s. You could do like, one of those World War II style serials, those old adventure stories. I
yeah.
mean, and then,
Well, you could do the old what the when Lucas did the Indiana Jones series, and it
yeah,
was
yeah,
you
yeah.
see, and much like Forrest Gump, he keeps interacting with these famous people and all of that. We could do that sort of thing. But it was, like I say, we had huge dreams for that. It was so exciting at the beginning, and it just, you know, never got there.
Yeah, well,
I
I
wish I
mean,
had saved a bunch of the artwork and things like that because it's you know, all gone. Nobody can find it. I'm
yeah.
sure Disney TV never had the archives that Disney Feature has.
Mhm.
Um, and unless you know specifically what you're looking for, there's no way to do it. And a lot of it was just deleted or lost. But some of the artwork and the backgrounds were so great, and the vehicle designs and all of that. Uh, just we had a great time doing that.
So I guess how many of those ideas were you able to kind of segue over from Atlantis into Hellboy when you started doing it? Because I mean, Hellboy is without a doubt one of my favorite comic series. I mean, the live action movies, I mean, they didn't do a bad job, but they didn't really capture, what I felt the character should be. Even
Well, I
though
felt
the action in the
I
book
was,
was there.
a lot of people, they go to a convention, and they're a comics convention, and it's about a movie of some sort, and the director always says, "Oh, I'm a big fan," and it's always like, "Yeah, because you got the deal and then you read all the comics or something." And it's like,
Right,
no,
right.
I was a Hellboy fan from the beginning. I was even in the online Hellboy.com
Oh
bulletin
wow.
board, that there was a group of us who got invited to Guillermo's first premiere and all of that, from Canada and all across the United States. Um, so I was definitely a fan, and my goal was to capture the uniqueness of what Mike had on the page. And in fact, Mike did because he worked on the original Atlantis. He
Mhm.
actually did creature design for our series. At the beginning, he'd read the scripts, and then it was like, just tell me what the monster is. I don't have time to go through the scripts. Um, and that was, a lot of fun to have that. And so actually being able to go to Hellboy, it wasn't originally, it was supposed to be a series, and then the people couldn't make a deal because it was a 3 or 4 way partnership. And ultimately what they settled on, okay, we're not doing a series, but we're going to do a series of movies. So they had the rights for like 7 years. So the idea was we'd do at least 7 movies, which in Hellboy terms would be great because you don't have to tell a big epic story each time. You could
Yeah.
do a movie where it's just the guys investigate a haunted house, and it's way more haunted than anybody expected. um, so that would have been a lot of fun, and the first 2 movies overlapped, so there was very little learning curve to them. It was just, again, working at a crazy pace. um, and then we had a break. I did another movie before we got permission to write the third movie. And then I had to do a movie, Turok, Son of Stone, which is the most violent thing I've ever worked on. And then I was supposed to do the third Hellboy, but instead the company was sold to Stars Media, and Stars says we don't want to put our money into original stuff. That's not our business plan. So we did a great script. The first movie was Sword of Storms.
Mhm.
Um, was basically kind of a tribute to how Hellboy started, which was a bunch of short stories. I mean, not except we did them all Japanese influence, and I felt the
Mhm.
connecting tissue wasn't as strong as the short stories. Um, the second one was like exploring Hellboy's roots of vampires and Central European mythology,
Yeah.
werewolves, and whatnot. The third one was basically going to be Nazis, cyber apes, floating heads in jars. It was the mad scientist side of things with Lobster Johnson. And that would have been, we feel it would have been the best one, because now we knew what worked well and what, was like, that doesn't translate as much as we wanted.
Yeah.
So it was a shame. That would have been fantastic. So.
Now, one of the things I love about Hellboy is that I don't know, but just the world building is so good on it that they go back and focus on like specific historical events. I mean, a lot of references to real world occultism. Let me ask you, when you were kind of approaching the project, did you like go back and like research any influences that you wanted to specifically bring into it, or were there any specific like comic series story arcs that you wanted to take influence from?
Well, I had been working with Mike because of Atlantis. So I already knew him. And when I left Disney, I actually needed some sample scripts. So I did 2 Hellboy scripts that Mike read over. And then he says, same thing. It was like, I can't really help on these anymore for projects that aren't going to happen,
Yeah, yeah,
necessarily,
yeah.
which came in handy when, of course, they did happen. But no, I have a bunch of supernatural books right there, I didn't need to do specifics like that. It would be more about the actual story. So uh, if we decided, and again, Mike is a person who just is, if you like hire a car to bring him to your studio, in that car ride over, he's probably generated 3 ideas that for anybody else would be major motion pictures.
Right.
Uh, I'm on the Turok Son of Stone. I was very frustrated that it was more of the story of this, and some people love this stuff, but it was like, you killed my father, and revenge kind of story. And at the first script only had one dinosaur in it and some giant prehistoric birds. And I was telling Mike,
Doesn't work for Torah.
I said to me, classic Turok, because they couldn't do the video games. They had to go back to the Dell comics or the Gold Key comics.
Yeah.
I said, to me, Turok is the guy who dips his arrows in poison berries and fights T-Rexes. And Mike, Mike instantly came back. He says, he's the guy who dips his arrows in poison berries, kills a T-Rex, skins it, makes boots out of its skin, and walks and runs across molten lava. And it's just like, that's the kind of stuff you wanted to do. And that project didn't go that. I thought actually that kind of spirit would be more successful. But that's just how his brain works. So, I'm sure he would have, somewhere along the line, we could have mentioned a secret society. And because he had put so much of that into Hellboy, we'd say, oh, let's do this. And, you know, it was, again, my feeling to be closer to the comics without animating any specific comic story. Like I said, we took liberties too of how, like, Guillermo put a romantic relationship on Hellboy and Liz Sherman.
Right.
And he also made Hellboy in the first movie kind of like a hormonal teenager, where to me Hellboy was the Rock, as in
Yeah.
Sergeant Rock, not
Yeah. Yeah.
Dwayne. But he's the guy that, oh, I want to be on his team because they tend to come back alive. Uh, and then she was like, he was already an adult when she was brought into the organization as 13 years old. So that was more
It
the
doesn't age
world I
well.
was coming from. Yeah. Well, yeah, not as a romance, certainly. So we didn't do that sort of thing at all. So it was like we changed things here and there. Like I said, the third one actually would have been our origin of Hellboy. And I think we changed it slightly where actually the professor helps save Hellboy more directly, as opposed to I'm watching this thing happen and it all takes place. And then, you know, oh, here's the baby. What do we do with him? But that was, you know, that would have been flashbacks. That brought in Obster Johnson to be closer to the origin too.
Yeah.
So there were little things like that of what can we do that's fun, still in the spirit of the comic. So who knows where we went? I know Mike liked the idea of, like those old Basil Rathbone Sherlock Holmes, that every story doesn't have to solve World War II. It can just be, that's a really cool mystery.
Yeah.
So the idea of just doing, how can we make this one totally different than the last one? I mean, I didn't pitch a story to Mike. For the first one, we talked about mythology. And when I hit, you know, I had a book on Japanese mythology, said, oh, that's really strange stuff. Let's do that, you know? So it was like that kind of, you know, stuff. And there were specific ideas. I was very tickled when Mike saw something. He said, oh, I'm going to tell people I came up with that. I said, feel free, you know. But they're just little specific moments, you know, that it's like, yes, you know, the idea that here's this woman playing the Japanese stringed instrument in the middle of the woods. Now, later on, you find out the bottom half of her is a giant spider, but she's just playing this instrument. And as she plays, you kind of go in close, and there's blood flowing along the strings and dripping off. And it's just like, you don't explain it. It was just that kind of creepy weirdness that Mike
Yeah.
loved. You know, by the end, we were throwing ideas back and forth. You forget, well, who came up with that one? And that's where you want to be with the creator of the character. But yeah, that was the one. Again, that the fun thing about that project was you always write for yourself. In that, I'm doing Darkwing Duck, I have to write what I believe is going to be funny. You can't distance yourself and you know, say, oh, those kids will love this, you know, that's what
Hmm.
kids love these days, you know. See, there's always that, your sense of humor, your sense of entertainment is in it. With Hellboy, though, it was like I could play with, yes, they're going into a haunted house. This is not Scooby-Doo, where suddenly you have people shivering and saying, gosh, it's a haunted house. It's, no, people discover how haunted it is while they're there. I was very pleased with an image you came up with. Um, they've all split up, and Abe Sapien is in this room with a big picture window looking out on the grounds of this mansion. And he's reporting by intercom to one of the other agents. And he says, no, nothing here is happening yet. And you see a little mist come out of his mouth. And he goes, hold on, temperature's dropping. And he's like looking around, the music changes a little bit. And suddenly you go to a wide shot, and that big picture window behind him is full of bloody handprints. Uh, and you ultimately find out that it's being haunted by these hundreds of young girls who were killed by Elizabeth Bathory, who used to take baths in blood. Now that's
Yeah.
based on an actual
Yeah.
person.
Yeah. 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 She was one of
Uh,
the first vampire rumors
yeah,
in
and we
mid,
got him.
right?
Yeah, and we got ambitious with our storytelling in that, like the movie Memento, there were flashbacks that ran through that movie running in reverse order. So it's like when you get this flashback of seeing the professor dealing with this vampire woman, that's the end of his adventure. And then you go back to the day where they're just about to set off. And each of those scenes nestle into a scene going on. And it's got a, you know, it basically comments on the scene around it. And I was very
Mhm.
pleased with that sort of thing. Don't listen to the behind the scenes the director's commentary on that one, because I always do the same thing. And the writer of it, Kevin Hops, told me, he said, yeah, I loved it until, well, I listened to the commentary and turns out it was a piece of crap. And it's like, I can't help talking about what I wanted to do with something, as
Yeah.
opposed to, wasn't it neat how the blood dripped off the screen, you know, the strings, or, you know, I regret that. But there's plenty of great stuff in there, and just, we're just getting warmed up. So that would
Yeah.
have been, that would have been a fantastic project to see through.